The Associated Press is projecting Eric Adams to be the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City. Nearly every vote has been counted, including absentee ballots. The Brooklyn Borough president leads Catherine Garcia by just over 8,400 votes. Garcia, the former sanitation commissioner, has already conceded the race. The Brooklyn native grew up in a working-class household and was a survivor of police brutality. He served in the NYPD for 22 years before entering politics and built his campaign around addressing crime. Today on CBS This Morning, our Tony DeCopel asked Adams how he will bring New York City back while addressing inequalities.
We have to end inequalities, and those inequalities are real, and we cannot continue to ignore that they exist. And it really hurts. It hurts folks like you and I. Because listen, let's be clear. We are sheltered from the real abuse that our country is witnessing. And there's a permanent group of people that are living in systemic poverty. You and I, we go to the restaurant, we eat well, we take our Uber, but that's not the reality for America and New York. And so when we turn this city around, we're going to end those inequalities. And there's so many ways we can do it. We're dysfunctional as a city, and we're dysfunctional as a country. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has this quote: "We spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place." We're a professional place of pulling people out of the river of poverty. I'm going to take our city upstream. It's going to take our country upstream.
Let's bring in Adam Brewster now to wrap up this primary race. He's a CBS News political reporter and joins me now from New York City. Hi, Adam. So we just heard Eric Adams there saying he wants to end inequalities in New York City. But what specifically has Adams said he will do if elected to combat systemic poverty or inequalities in other areas like public transit and education?
Some of that, Tanya, goes back to his issue of reducing crime. Adams has talked about that, New York has seen an increase in crime, but there have been pockets of the city that have always dealt with issues like gang violence and crime, and those areas need help, whether that be more education resources, more mental health resources, getting into some of those communities within New York City that have had long sorts of struggles and trying to get at some of the root causes of inequality, poverty, and crime. You heard him talk about the Desmond Tutu quote of going upstream. He talks about, preventing crime by going upstream to solve the issue, doing things like dyslexia screening. That's something that he talks about a lot that needs to be done more in schools to try to make sure kids are getting a better education. Education is one of the things that he points to as something that can uplift people and sort of help equalize the table. On the transit, he made a joke there, saying he and, some others are able to get around the city and take Ubers. Of course, many in the city have to rely on buses and subways. So it's about making sure that people feel safe on those platforms, that there are, in his view, he wants to see a law enforcement presence there, but also seeing people who can deal with some of the mental health issues that exist there. He's talked about creating, more affordable housing, potentially through some rezoning, having things like free or reduced access to or subsidized access to childcare, a whole host of issues, a lot of things that you can talk about on the campaign trail. When it comes time to putting those things into a budget, we'll see how, what gets each priority. But he has certainly talked about a lot of issues that need to be addressed in terms of the inequalities that still exist in New York City.
And now that just about all of the votes have been counted, what did Adams' constituency end up looking like? And what was ultimately his winning message?
Well, a lot of his voters came from these sort of working class communities, minority communities within the Bronx, within Brooklyn, the borough where he is borough president, and within Southeast Queens. Those were a big part of what lifted him up to a lead among first choice votes and sort of helped continue to carry him along the way as the ranked choice tabulation went. His campaign touted that diverse working class coalition that they said they built in a statement last night when they declared victory. And in terms of his signature message, again, you keep coming back to it, but he was sort of the candidate who, started talking about crime as a central issue a bit before some of the other candidates did. This race started in the middle of the pandemic. COVID and the recovery were sort of the big issues. As it became clear that more New Yorkers were getting vaccines, things were opening up, people started to shift their attention to crime. It's something that Adams had been talking about. He talks about his personal experiences, being beaten by police officers when he was a teenager, working within the NYPD and trying to change some of the practices from within the NYPD. He has said this is about, not just safety, but also justice, and not necessarily going back to the way things were, but being better at intervening on crime, better at preventing it in the future, while still ensuring that there is, racial justice within the process.
And, in the end, Adams did not win the first place votes of 68% of New York Democrats, looking at this sort of ranked choice voting scenario. So what is he planning to do to bring together all Democrats, especially those in the left wing of the party? Because he sort of ran as one of the more moderate candidates. So thinking about the fact that he needs to bring all those people together, or maybe he doesn't. I mean, maybe New York is a shoo-in for the Democratic candidate every time, but you would think that he would want to try to unite the party regardless. So what do you think is his strategy for that?
Well, in terms of that, look, Democrats outnumber Republicans in New York from a registration standpoint about 7-1. He'll go into November with a big structural advantage, and you've heard his fellow candidates say, whether that be Catherine Garcia, whether that be Maya Wiley, et cetera, we're going to back the Democratic nominee because that is who we want to see put into office. There were some pictures that emerged of the parade downtown in New York today where they were honoring healthcare and frontline workers, of Adams taking pictures with members of a union that endorsed Maya Wiley, a progressive candidate in the race, sort of embracing each other, a sign that, people will be able to get along. And look, he'll probably have some battles ahead of him if he wins in November, when he deals with budget issues and fighting some of the, members of the city council or other members who are elected citywide who might be more progressive than he is in terms of, what budget priorities are. But that'll be something that, anyone within, within a city that has, essentially Democratic control, there are members who believe that things should be done differently, right? There are left wing members, there are moderate members. People would like to see money spent differently. So those types of clashes, may continue, and that's sort of part of the governing process. But in terms of getting everyone on the same page in November and getting into office, certainly you'll see him continue to probably be out there during the summer and take this campaign seriously, because, there will be an election. There is a Republican opponent still in November. Certainly they're not going to take anything for granted on that end.
Absolutely. Well, Adam Brewster, thank you so much. We appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Tanya.